Hello everyone and good evening. We all like watching movies, right? Whether we go to the movie theater or we stay and watch them in the comfort of our own homes. We like seeing behind the scenes footage because the process of a drawing and the actual animation phase is pretty interesting, right? Well, the process of animation and how it was viewed is completely different now from how it was back then. One person made a big impact on the animation and film industry as a whole by changing that. That person was Walt Disney. Now, we might know Walt most from his contributions in the entertainment industry. But aside from creating theme parks and cartoons, he had a little bit more to him. My name is Jaden Taylor, and I'm going to tell you about how Walt Disney changed the animation and film industry. Walt Disney once said, "It's kind of fun to do the impossible." Well, the impossible started back in 1921. At like 20 years old, Walt opened his first animation studio in Kansas City, Missouri called Laugh-O-Gram Studios. His intention with Laugh-O-Gram Studios was to make animated fairy tales. Fortunately, not long after the studio opened, he suffered bankruptcy and the studio shut down before he even got to release any of the cartoons he was working on. About 2 years later, Walt and his brother Roy went to California and founded the Walt Disney Company in 1923, and it is currently the oldest running animation studio in the world. Now, we know that Walt Disney always loved drawing and creating new characters. One of his most iconic characters is the infamous mouse that we all know and love today, Mickey Mouse. Almost 93 years later, and he is still one of the most famous cartoon characters of all time. Well, after producing many short films and cartoons, Walt finally got to create a series with one of the first characters he had developed, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, in 1927. However, in 1928, Walt actually ended up losing the rights to Oswald, and many of his employees were poached in a corporate dispute. In response to this tragedy, Walt decided to create a new character that he named Mortimer Mouse. His wife Lillian suggested the name Mickey because she didn't really like Mortimer Mouse. Mickey Mouse made his debut in 1928 in Steamboat Willie, which became one of the first short films to have synchronized sound effects. In 1934, Walt Disney started to create Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. With creating the movie, he actually took out a mortgage on his house of $1.5 million. At the time, the idea of having that budget to create an animation film seemed crazy. But once it was released in 1937, the moving reaction that the film received was the start of the golden age of animation. Early animation featured moving characters on a static background. This means that when each frame of the character would make a small movement, the background would have a small shift in it. This gave the impression that the character was actually inhabiting the space, but this became difficult with the more lifelike backgrounds with these characters. Some movies back then were actually presented with actual actors before they were animated. When creating this movie, he found this very difficult with figuring out how to move the camera or where to stand for his shots. So, he and his team tackled that challenge and created the multiplane camera. This involved a number of moving pieces of artwork past the camera at different speeds and at various distances. As a result of this, it created the three-dimensional effect. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was the first animated movie to use the multiplane camera. Walt saw the opportunity of using this camera to create more of an imaginative nature of animation. People have only sat through 5-minute short films before Snow White was released. In 1989, when The Little Mermaid was released, the digital multiplane camera was invented, and this became one of the first animated movies to have the transition of hand-drawn images to computer-aided creations that we always now see and use today. So how did Disney impact the animation and the film industry? Well, Walt Disney used the effect of synchronized sound in a cartoon when it was presented to the people in the theaters. He had helped create the multiplane camera. If we did not have this camera, we would have not had the digital version of this, and we wouldn't see animation how we do today, from storyboards to computer imaging. Walt introduced many more sophisticated techniques in animation, which enforced the concept of cartoon characters having personalities and making the first full-length featured film. An example of one of these he used was the multiplane camera. He was responsible for creating the first synergistic entertainment company. He changed the face of cinema after Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was released, and he went on to directing full-length films instead of only cartoon shorts. He changed the course of cinema with his work in society. Disney had created an impact in some people's childhoods. How did this company make such a large impact in our childhoods and on the world? This happened because of the Disney model. The Disney model has changed and revolutionized the film industry by designing films that were targeted to younger audiences or groups of all ages by telling awesome stories of adventure and fantasy. Disney took movies to another level by mixing together different creative storytellings, the visuals, beautiful visuals by the way, and the childhood wonder that we as kids have, but that the adults want. These messages made such an impact in the world on how we treat others, the different cultures, etc. In the words of Walt Disney, I hope that we never lose the sight of one thing, that it all started with a mouse. Thank you.